Okay, everybody, we're going to get this Ivinex webinar started. All right. First, I want to say again, thank you for attending. Appreciate it, and hopefully these webinars are, dishing out enough information and tips and tricks of how to use Ivinex better for your company. My name is Brett Lund, if you don't know, and I'm going to be the host on this webinar and probably all the other ones too. So today, we're going to be talking about users and user groups and groups, users and groups, and the permission settings that you can use in Ivinex to kind of control, who can do what in the system. So that's the idea of the webinar today. Just again, a couple quick notes. I normally say this at the beginning. It's interactive. There is a little chat bubble icon on your Join Me tool that you can click to open up the chat. And feel free to ask questions. I do have all audio muted except for myself, but ask me questions and I'll try to answer them during the webinar, or build an example or whatever it takes to help answer that question. All right, so we're going to get started, I think. So, users, groups, and permissions. Now, if you've used Ivinex for just a little bit, and you're an admin for your Ivinex system, I'm sure you've, configured permissions, at least at the most basic level for a user or maybe a group. But there's a lot of permissions that you can set. I'm going to go through all of the settings and what they do. In this picture here, you've got group-based permissions, user-based permissions, and you can set permissions on fields. And then there are other places throughout the system where you can configure, permissions. Things for like reports have permissions built into them. Filters have permissions as well. So we'll go over those as well. And I'm just wondering here if I should show you where to find those. Now we'll handle that. We'll handle that a little bit later. So the first kind of permissions I want to talk about is global permissions. And I'm going to, before I go too detailed in here, I'm going to show you at least where to kind of get started to find the these normal permission settings. So I'm going to bring in my demo site here. And let's make that take up the whole screen. Okay. Oops. Okay, we will zoom in a little bit like always. Okay, so to set up user and group permissions, you have to be an administrator for your site. And if you are, of course, that would be a permission as well. If you have the permission to be an administrator, this wrench icon will show an additional setting in there. Instead of preferences and logout, you would also see admin. So I'm going to click that. And we're now in the admin area. And you've got right here in the general settings, there's the group manager and the user manager. So that's where you find settings, permission settings for, like, say, a group. Let's pick, I don't know, this one. You can have as many different groups as you want, and I'll go further into this. Just generally going over where you find the settings. You can create as many groups as you want. These are the current members in that group. You can just check them on and off. And then to see the actual permissions, you click this Display Permissions link, and it'll load up all the permissions for all of your modules, and then display them down below. And the only ones we're going to be concerned about are these ones right here, like demo account, demo contacts. So these are the current permissions that the group that I picked. These are the settings for that group. Anybody in this group gets these permissions, and it's per module. So you can configure all of those, which I'll go over again in a minute. But right now we're talking about global permissions, and those are found toward the bottom down here. these permissions down there. So let's go over those. The global permissions are email, which gives a group or whatever, or a user, the ability to send email and do email-based functions within Ivinex. Another global permission is just a checkbox for admin. So you could have a group called admin. And permissions, what? Christina is asking me a question here. Permissions? Do you have a question, Christina, real quick? No? Oh, I spelled it wrong? Okay, maybe I spelled it wrong. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, the admin permission is what gives you access to get into the administrative area. And, again, you could just create a group. I think Ivinex comes just pre-installed with 2 groups out of the gate, admin and everyone group. But you of course, are not limited to that. For your admin group, you may want to check the global permission down below. And that would give everyone in the admin group the permission to access the admin area. Hope that makes sense. Another permission is undelete. By default, normally people, deleted records or deleted records, but you can have a permission to not only undelete records, it works with a user-based setting as well. If you have undelete permissions, you can choose to see deleted records and then undelete them. So I'll demonstrate that here in a bit. The API is a global permission as well. What that means is normally what people will do to use the Ivinex API is you will create a user account. Maybe you could call it API if you want to. It can be called whatever you like. But you use this API user account and you give it the API permissions as a global permission, and then in your development, if you're looking to connect with Ivinex with some other system and you're doing API development, you would use that user account to communicate back and forth. Ask Ivinex for information using this account. Maybe add new records or whatever you need to do. So these are considered global permissions, and they're found at the bottom down here. So I'm in this group. So this group has globally, anyone in this group can do email, and globally, any user in this group has admin capabilities, but they do not have these other 2 global permissions. So let's see. So that's global permissions. Okay. One thing I want to talk about is because there are permissions that you can do for groups and permissions you can do for users, sometimes people might get confused as to what permissions do I have, or what permissions, in total does this group have, or what does this user have. They work together. I would recommend setting up permissions at the group level because it makes it a lot easier to manage. You can just set up a set of permissions per module for a group, and then just assign people to it. You're in this group, you just get all these permissions. That's probably the preferred way. But you can also assign specific permissions to specific people, and they will be added on to the permissions that they have from whatever group they're in, and you can be in multiple groups. So it gets a little bit confusing. Say, for example, I am in a group called, this one, DT or something, and I have these permissions, but maybe I'm also in a group called admin up here, which I am, and so I would also have, let's let that load. I would also have all of these permissions. So that's just a lot of permissions for this admin group. And that other group had its permissions set as well. So how would I know just for this one user, say, which one, Ivinex demo, what's the total level of permissions that this user has? Instead of going to the group manager, I would go to the user manager and then pick them or that user account and click display permissions here. And while that's loading, over here on the right hand side of the user settings or the user information, it shows over here what groups you're in. So you can also manage this user. I'm going to take you out of that group and add you to this one. You can do it from the user side and from the group side. So what I'm looking at here is, instead of looking at a group, I'm looking at a specific user account. So that now there's an additional column here. I've got from the group that groups that I'm in, and it says which one. This user is in group admin right here, and they're getting all of these permissions for this module. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to see if I can find one where there's multiple groups. Probably right here. Here's a good example. So right here, it's showing from group admin, this user has these permissions. From this other group, this user has these permissions. Now, some of them are the same. Read, tab, create, edit. So what happens in that case? Well, just think of it as a bucket of permissions, and even though I'm having this permission from that group and this permission from this group, in reality, it's really just the same permission. I have read capabilities for this module as this user. I'm just getting it from two different spots, but in the end, it really just means I have one, read permission either way. Now, at the user level here, I think I've actually added one. No, maybe I did it for this user. I'm going to pick this other user. I think I have an example of user and group working together. Maybe not. I'm going to go back to that user and I'm just going to set it up. Okay. Let that load. Now, again, on the right-hand side, this is what you're getting from the group. And then my special permissions, oh, yeah, I do have one right here. This one is, this user has this permission, which is print, for this module, and that is the only extra permission that this user has for this module that only applies to them. If I look at the group level, print is not a permission already set from the group. So you take what I have from the group and add in what I'm getting from this user configuration, and that's the total permissions that I have. So if I clicked this one again and saved it, again, it would just, I already had read access. So, you could do this. It wouldn't break anything, of course. You would still have read access already by default from your group. But this one right here is in addition to this one because the group doesn't have print capabilities. Any questions about that at all? They're cumulative. You get the highest level across all the permissions that you have. That's how the total permissions you have in your for your user. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so back here. Again, in addition. Okay, great. So we'll move on. Wait, let me make sure I didn't miss something over here. I wanted to go over each setting and what it does first before I moved on to the next section. So let's talk about these. Okay. Now, one thing I want to point out is that a lot of people will come over here, jump into their system, and create a new module, and then come around to the front side and be instantly confused because their new module that they just created, they can't see it. It's not, they don't know where to find it. And the reason for that is that all modules that you create do not have any set permissions. They're blank. They have zero permissions across the board, meaning no one can access it. Unless you're an admin, you can come in here and see it and configure it, but on the front end, you're not going to see it. You're not going to be able to work with it. So right after creating a module, the very next thing you're going to want to do is set up the permissions for that new module. Okay? So make sure to do that. Let's go back to the group manager here, and we'll go over each setting and what it does. All right, go to maybe this one. Okay. Let's talk about each one. Read. Well, no, actually, I'm going to talk about this tab one. What does tab mean? This permission right here, tab, is probably the most, it makes a lot of sense. If you click that, you get the tab on the front side, one of these. The tab is shown, or you have the ability to click something like that. I can click this button or this tab up here to get to my records for that module. So that's what the tab permission does. Read allows me to read or see records that are in that module. I'll talk about the filter here in a minute, but that's just even the ability to even see records. Edit, of course, can I edit any of these records or can I only read them? Create new records would be this create permission. A lot of these are self-explanatory. Delete, of course, delete a record and a link, the possibility of linking to some record in this module. Remember that, is that can this group that I'm in link to a record in this module? So it's not like link out, it's the ability to link to something in this module. That's what link is for. Mass update just enables the options that you have available to you for the mass tools. You got the mass update, mass email, and mass delete is part of mass update. So I think if you have a mass update, I think you get mass delete and mass update all together. Mass email, of course, is it's its own kind of separate little thing. The ability to export, the ability to import, and I'm actually going to turn every one of these on just so I can kind of show you on the front end what they look like. So let's update permissions. That's another thing. Once you're done with all your changes, make sure to update. The nice thing is that you can do multiple permission setups. So you don't have to just do this one module, click update permissions. I can show as many as I want. Do this too, and then fix another one and do that, and then click update, and it's going to save everything, the whole set all together. There's a question about clicking save up here after clicking update permissions. No, you don't have to do that. Think of this button and this section as being a little bit separate from up here. If I click, like adjust the users that are in the group, the save button applies to this top section. The update permissions just updates this bottom area, so you don't have to click save to save these permissions. Just click the update permissions button only. Okay, so let's see our new permissions in action. And we're going to use the demo accounts module. We have full everything. So let's go see what we can do over there now. So demo accounts. Okay, so I can definitely read my records. I can update, which is editing. I can delete, because I have that permission. I have the ability to link to these records in some way. This one is the import data. This little icon will not appear if you don't have the import permission. This is the export icon for just straight up exporting out some data. If you don't have export permission on, you're not going to have that. These are the mass update, the mass tools. If I click that, I've got update, delete, and email. I've got everything available to me. If you didn't have mass email permission, then you would just see these two only, and you wouldn't have the mass update permission. The ability to print labels based off your data. This icon shows up if you have the label permission. Okay, and then down below, down here, this email icon is one of those global permissions. Do I have the ability to email? Yep, because I've got a global permission to email. Let's go back to here. I can print, so that's what that other one is. And then view change history. This is another permission. It's mostly for kind of admins use it. I don't think most users will use it all that much, but I'll explain what it does. But that is a permission. So email, global permission, printing, and then this is called the change history. And what it does is it kind of shows me the history of my record. If I go way down here at the bottom, this record was created, and then, the changes will be represented by what it was on the left to what it is on the right. So let's go up here. At one point, it was called Example Company, and then somebody changed the account name from Example Company to, that Bluebird Sales Division. Now, obviously, it's not that anymore. So it kept changing. A bunch of stuff was going on. So I won't go too in-depth as to this change history window, but it is permission controlled. If you have a permission to access it, you're going to get that from a permission. So let's go back. What else? That about covers it. So let's talk about, should I go into that yet? Let me just check back in here. Are there any questions so far about the permissions and how you set them or what they do? Does anybody have any questions about that at the moment? No? Okay. All right. So what can we do? We have a lot of power with permissions. What all can we do with them? Before I go all the way into that, I'm going to show you where some of those other permissions are found that I was talking about at the very beginning, which is a filter permission. Let's say I've got a new filter. Actually, we'll just use this one. So here's a filter that I created, my user created. I'm going to click Edit. And a lot of people don't notice, but there's this permission button on it. What does it do? Right here, I can say who can view this filter. So me as a user, I've created the best filter ever, and I need to share it with people. It could be a specific person. Just this one guy, he's my friend. He gets the best filter, everybody else doesn't. Or I could simply share it with a whole group. I could say, hey, the customer service group could benefit from this filter, so I click that. That would give the customer service group permission to view or have access to my filter. I can click like this and keep adding additional ones, or click in the middle and turn that one off. Now, if you're on a Mac, I believe that is Command click. On the right, these permissions are the same idea. Who can edit that filter? So maybe I made it. I'm not going to lock down the functionality. Anyone can adjust it. You would give permissions for that right here. And it's just the same thing. Either a group, a user, or multiple groups, maybe 3 groups, 2 users, something like that. But that's where the permissions are set for filters. What else? We've got fields. Let's talk about that. I don't think I've talked about that yet. Okay. When you're in the admin tool, you're working on your module. Maybe that right there, I picked this field, and it's got something special, going on here where only certain people or maybe a certain group should be able to see it and nobody else. So once you click the field, I can look over here and there's this permission setting. I can add some permissions. Now this is just for changing the field, not necessarily seeing the field. It's for, can somebody change it? So what are we going to do? I could just do a whole group, or I could do a user. Maybe you've got a manager, and only the manager can adjust this field, but everybody else, can just view the value of it. So that's how you would configure it. Just pick whatever field you want and set up the permissions. The users would change permissions. So another place to configure permissions. Okay. Let's see what else. Okay, so now that I've configured or talked about those, let's go back to the group manager and talk about those filter settings really quick. Let's do this one. Now, half of what I'm going to say isn't necessarily all about permissions because it's kind of about filtering, but I'll show you how you can set up different modules and filters that are applied right out of the gate that can be, a permission-controlled thing or grouped. So let's say for my accounts, the people who I want to be able to read those, let's say here's we've got everyone in this group can read the records for this module, but maybe I want to do something a little bit more, like let's see, user group maybe. There we go. We'll use that. So if you have the permission to read it, I could further pare that down to something like a different group. Maybe that would be kind of like overriding what I'm doing here by saying, for your group, you can read it, and then I could be kind of silly and say, but only if you're in the admin group on the read, which doesn't make much sense, but it is a way to use group permissions like in a filter. So you could use this anywhere, maybe on the front end, where I've got this filter, and I would use the grouping of people, like current group equal to everyone, and save, and then they would have access to it. So not necessarily too much permissions going on here, other than maybe the grouping. So these filters right here are applied right out of the gate. It's something that the user cannot change. So if I pared it down by, let's use a good example, just a normal filter, current user. So no, actually I'm going to use created by current user. Okay, what this filter would do is everyone would be able to see accounts, records, but only the records where the person currently logged in created that record. So if I've created 5 records, I would only see 5 records, or the ones that I created for this module, and there's no way I could change this. This isn't a filter that I can change. It's done from the admin side, and it's applied right at the beginning. So any filters that I create on the front end would be based off this pre-filtered record set that's already in effect. So I see this used a lot. Some people, I just want people to see their records only. Created by equal to a user in Ivinex is one way to do it. Another just could be maybe using a different field, like maybe account owner. Maybe you have a field for account owner, and then you could assign that to somebody, like that guy, and then this person would be able to see certain records. Anyway, the idea behind that is a pre-filter. Edit is the same way. I can apply a pre-filtered rules to any records that appear for editing, or what people can edit. I can filter that here. Are there any questions about that piece? I hope I explained that well enough for you. Okay, no questions on that. So what would be a good way to use permissions initially? I would think that any company that has teams, it's easy to set up teams in Ivinex. Every company is unique, but a lot of people have teams where you would have a sales team. So maybe a sales team, you'd assign certain users to it, and you could configure the permissions to work just the way they need to work. Hold on one second, I have a question. Got a question about displayed records. A related account showing below a record. I've got that's a pretty complicated question from Christina. I'll probably have to answer that one offline because I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking. So I'll address that one later. But it has to do with permissions and the related records down below. I'll address that one later. So back to groups. How do you want to use this? It's totally up to you. But teams is one way I see a lot of people do it. Create a group, assign some people to it. It's got permissions, the way, what they can and cannot do. One thing that does do is Ivinex, of course you can create as many data modules as you want and configure it however you want. I do get some questions like, what if I want to run two whole separate, methodologies inside of Ivinex? What if I've got 5 modules that contain data for one side of my company? They've got a fulfillment that they do. So I've got these modules just for them. And then I've got another 10 modules for my sales team. And then I've got, it goes on. And I want to lock this down. That's really easy. You could create a group called maybe fulfillment, and then give them permissions to the modules that only maybe they need to see. Pre-filter the records or do whatever you need to do there. And then maybe your sales team would have access to other ones. And then maybe in your everyone group, you could have something like documents and reporting and my day and activities. Everyone can have access to that, but maybe they don't see, the sales team modules or the accounting or however that works. You can do all of that through the groups and even the users. One other permission I missed that I just remembered is reports. There's permissions in there. I might as well just show that real quick. It's just right here. Every report has a permission setting, and it's just like the other one for filters. Who can view the report? So it's a way to, maybe create a set of reports that only the managers can see. Editing's the same way. Maybe the managers can see it, but the vice president is the only guy that can edit this report. Nobody else. So you got complete control at that point of each report. What even shows up based on what group somebody's in or even who they are. So I think that's the last permission I failed to show there. Let's see if there's anything else. We can use permissions in conjunction with display conditions. I'll show that one. That's a pretty common one. Let's do demo accounts. I've seen a lot of people mimic this right here, this admin sub-tab, and I'll explain why I do that. Maybe for a module, you want people to see certain information like this, or maybe even the address information. But maybe you contain other fields that you don't want the normal, person to be able to see or even do anything with. I normally create an admin sub-tab, and then I throw anything in there that might be, a system or some piece of data that I don't need everyone to deal with. And I want an easy way to group those as an admin so that I can see what's in there or troubleshoot or do whatever I need, but keep it away from everybody else. So you create a new tab, and this is just one way to do it. New tab, admin. I move whatever fields I want, put them in here, and then we could set up a display condition that uses permissions and groups to show and hide stuff. So maybe it would be current group is equal to, and I'm just going to pick one that I'm not in, like, I don't know, that, testing. So if your current group is equal to this group, then you will see this subtab once I apply this filter to it, or display condition filter. So now I've got a new one. It's called testing. I'm going to pick this subtab. I'm going to say display when. Display when, that is in effect, current group SGR or whatever I set that to. All of a sudden it disappears. I'm going to come around to the front end. In my accounts, click an account. I'm not in that group. So it's like it doesn't even exist to me. I can't see that subtab. I can't access it or anything. Now I'm going to go add myself to that group. Let's go to user manager here. Which one was it? That one. So we'll just save that. Now I'm in that group. So let's try again. Okay, so now I can access this information. So within just one record, I could sub-segment data out. Maybe my accountant needs to have certain information, or maybe everybody needs certain fields that they work with. Maybe my sales team, maybe there's a sales tab, and my sales team has other fields that they work with, and I don't want anybody else to deal with those unless you're in the sales team. So you can actually segment out sections of data inside a record. And of course, it does apply to the field all the way down to the field. So I'll display that one as well. Demo accounts. We'll pick this field. I could use this display condition. I could even enhance it with additional permissions like I showed before. So display when, always. How about testing? That's that if you're in that group, then you can see it. And then I could even add additional permission like, okay, if you're in that group, you can see it, but only that person can edit it. So additional stuff you can do. I'm going to click save on that. And then, anyway, that's a general idea. So all the way down to the field, we can do permissions. And I'm trying to think if there's any, does anybody have any other questions other than Christina's question that I'll have to address later? Are there any other questions? Because I think I've covered just about all the settings for permissions and maybe a few ways that you can use them in different ways to set up your Ivinex system. Are there any other additional questions at this time? No? All right, great. Well, then I think we're done. I'm just going to close out here real quick with saying again, thank you for attending. Hey, I like feedback on these things, and no one's sending me much feedback. I'd appreciate any. We do have a training site, training.ivinex.com, where I do post. I'm recording each one of these, and I'm going to be posting all the videos on the training site. Leave me a comment. If you're not getting the webinar emails, or someone in your company could benefit from these webinars, and they're not on the list or not getting the email, in the bottom right-hand corner of the training site, you can put in the email or have them do that and click submit. I'm also putting all of these webinars on our Facebook page. You can go there and click it and say I'm attending, those kind of things. And I think that's about it. I did have one last question. Let's see if I can answer it real quick. Can workflows edit if the permissions are set for one person only? Okay. Well, we can jump back in here and answer that question real quick. A workflow isn't a person. A workflow is a behind-the-scenes automated process that's happening. So the question I'm assuming is, if I've got like an edit permission on here of only, Bruce here can edit that field, will a workflow be able to do something? The answer is yes. Yeah, because a workflow is not a user, It's going to do its job, just behind the scenes, automated process. It's not, permissions do not apply to it. There's no way to tell it, hey, workflow, you can only do this and that and the other. Oh, one other thing, I do need to say this, in case anyone is ever thinking of using the API. I did want to talk about this. Let's talk about User Manager. Okay, so say this account is used for API. Let me just pull that up. This is important. Let's go with thing. Okay. Let's say I'm going to use this account for my API communication. One thing to note is that, of course, this would be on, but just make note of this, is that the permissions that this user has are in effect. So if you create a user for API communication and all you check is API, it means they have the ability to communicate with the API. But if they have no other permissions, then it's pretty much, it's not going to be able to do anything at all. So API means, yep, I can talk through the API, and what can I do? Well, I can do whatever permissions I have. So I could read records from here. I could create, edit, delete. I can do all of these things per module through the API. So make sure that if you have a user account set up for API work, make sure to set up the permissions, because you may run into a situation where, why can't I edit this, or I'm trying to create a record. You may not, that API user account may not have that permission. So anyway, I think that's about it. We'll bring this to a close here on users, groups, and permissions. I want to thank everybody, and hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.